Welcome back to Mechabellum, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to be going over the units of Mechabellum here, so you can kind of get a small idea. Since I started playing, there have been buffs, there have been nerfs, and even the war factory down here was added. So first things first, let's go over with the smallest spot in the game, the crawler. Over here you can see their general types of, stats and just all the basic stuffs. Speed is a very important thing to do for unit builds, as well as their respected upgrade levels for the color that they get, as well as 24. So they spawn in this group. They are tiny little mech bots. As you can see, the humans standing over here, not very huge, but these are the upgrade tree. Now with the upgrade tree here, you actually get tech points, as you can see right below which upgrades you have selected. As you level up in the game, you get more tech points because every single unit you have access to at the start, but you don't have access to every single one of their abilities. You'll get 4 random abilities, or not really random, but you'll get 4 preset abilities, and then you can use your tech points to go in and unlock different ones and mix and match as you say, oh please. So if I wanted to get rid of mechanical drill, I could just slap in acid explosion instead, which I might just do anyway. So these are quick little swarm bots. They are very fast. They have some pretty great abilities. They hide underground, so it nullifies damage dealt to them. They travel faster, attack faster, move faster. My personal favorite is replicate. So destroyed enemies create more crawlers, so they turn crawlers into crawlers. They can't attack air, they only hit ground, and they are good for overwhelming your enemies or using just a quick general fast meat shield in front of some of your more sensitive units. Next up we have the Fang, which is just a general multi-purpose bot. Very quick. They spawn in groups of 18. They are not very fast, but they are cheap and can be pretty effective when used properly. They can attack air and ground. They are just kind of squishy and slow moving, but they are still a relatively decent unit, all things considered. They also have a little bit of a range, nothing crazy. It's rather short. Some of their abilities as well, just attack faster, deal more damage, longer range, just AR dot abilities as well as shield. So some of the shields in this game either give them an additional health bar or they just block a full instance of damage, depending on which one you get. Next up we have the Marksman, which is my personal favorite unit in the game. Look at him, look at that tall boy, the people down here below. Thanks, chat. I wonder if I could, what if I just go bang? Maybe that'll get rid of it. E is a 1 single unit, which is in a 4x4 square. He has a crazy range. He isn't very fast, and he doesn't have a lot of health either, but he is actually rather, cost-effective. And he attacks very slow, but he does a massive bit of damage with this massive gun on his back that you can see here. Yeah, that's a gun. That's a big rail gun. He's pretty much just a sniper. The abilities that I choose, I don't even have assault mode. I don't even know what this does. This must be new. I see. But the ones I choose, which I have the most success with, is just longer range, double shot, which fires 2 shots every time he attacks, but then his reload time increases, so his attack interval is slower. Shooting squad, which at the beginning of combat you summon 5 fangs at the same level as the marksman to fight with you, the fangs from the previous one, as well as elite marksman, which every time you rank up a marksman, his range is increased by 8. His attack damage increases by 20%. Very good unit, very one to have way in the back. Having a lot of marksmen on your team with a pretty beefy front line is almost a surefire way to win every single match that there is. Now we have the Arc Light, which is a very different kind of unit. Spawns in as 1, still the price of 100, takes up a 4x4 square. Is a bit faster, a bit more health, and then his attack is relatively quickly, but much shorter range than the marksman respectively. He can only attack ground, but he deals crazy splash damage. So arc lights are really good against like Fangs, Mustangs, crawlers, and any other kind of swarm units. Obviously, increased range at least marksman, same thing as the actual marksman. Charge shot, which increases just the overall damage, and then just bulkier armor because he is more of a frontliner. Now you can use anti-aircraft, so he can hit air as well. Now this is very useful whenever it comes to handling wasps or other kind of swarming air units. You can be able to knock them out there pretty quickly. Arc lights are pretty neat, and they are the bane of the early rounds for sure. Next up, we got SWASPs. These are your light, fast little air harassment units. Cheap, it's 200, so a little bit more, and of course they spawn at 12 of them inside of this little box here. They move very quickly, their health is incredibly low, their attack is incredibly low, and their attack speed is also low. And the range isn't all that great, but they can hit air and ground units. These are really good if your opponent is up your shit and just using ground-only units, kind of like that previous round from my last episode, where they were mostly using rhinos and phoenixes. And it got some wasps, and it started to look well, but just got outdone. They have a plethora of abilities as well. I use the first 4 personally. I don't really use many upgrades on the wasp except for 2, and then that would be the energy shield. So they block damage and increase their general health, and jump drive, which means in between rounds you can actually pick up the wasp and move them elsewhere. This is very, very, very useful. Next up, Mustangs. Mustangs are a fantastic multi-purpose unit. They are incredibly quick. They're not very tanky though. They have good range. They attack incredibly quickly at a few times a second, but for lower damage, obviously. And they can hit air and ground. People always underestimate Mustangs. They are very, very great units and kind of tricky to deal with, but they do have some pretty hard counters. Of course, Missile Interceptor, which is obviously the best ability in the game. So anytime enemy missiles come at you, whether it be those sentry missiles, missiles from ships, or any other kind of unit, they'll shoot them out of the sky before they can hit the ground, which is incredible. Just range, general attack damage, and of course damage to aerial units. So if somebody's spamming a bunch of air, they really just can't compete with Mustangs regardless of what kind of air unit it may be. We got Sledgehammers. Sledgehammers are tanks. That's it. They're just tanks. They are fantastic units, though. They are very tanky, a little bit slow. Their attack is relatively high with a little bit of splash as well, although they shoot slow. They spawn in the group of 5, costing 200, and obviously they can only hit ground. They have a good amount of units as well. Auto repair, so whenever they're that obviously increases their general health, but then they restore a little bit of the health whenever they take damage, and armor plating as well, so per level their HP is increased. Very, very good frontliner. Range is obviously incredible for them, and increases their movement speed and attack intervals, so they'll shoot faster. I love going crawlers, sledges, and marksmen. Assuming my opponent doesn't do something a little bit funky, I try to stay with that, and I have great success with it. They do have a very unique ability, though, called damage sharing. So chains adjacent sledgehammers together, increasing their overall HP by 120, and they share damage equally. So if you damage one sledgehammer, you actually damage all 5, but all their health bars is combined into one thing. So if one goes, they all go. Now this is very good or very bad depending on if your opponent knows what they're doing. If you're playing with beginners, getting damage sharing on your sledgehammers can really wreak some havoc. The Steel Ball. We love some balls. Very, very unique unit, incredibly quick, incredibly tanky, and their attack deals 2 damage to 2400 damage. No splash, they deal their damage very, very quickly, but every single time they do a tick of damage, so 5 per second, it increases the overall damage they do. So the longer their little laser beam that they have on them stays on a single target, the more damage they're going to be dealing to it. It's very good against large units or anybody with damage sharing. So like other balls, sledgehammers, or anything else that have a combined health bar. The longer the balls are on them, the more damage they deal, and you can wipe out an entire squad. They can only hit ground though. And they have a hard time with swarm units, obviously, because their damage has to charge up. But they have this ability here, energy absorption, which increases their health by 40% and then converts damage dealt to their own health, which is very, very, very jazzy indeed. Next up, we got the Stormcaller. Really, really powerful unit, albeit incredibly, incredibly weak, just like the Marksman. Very slow, insane range, and really slow attack interval, but they deal crazy splash and crazy attack damage for what they are. Spawn in the group of 4. These are your artillery launchers. These people stand way in the back and then shoot a barrage of missiles, I believe 4 per Stormcaller, and then the bullets don't track those, so wherever they fire where the unit is where they're going to end up. So if you have quick moving units, the Stormcallers are going to constantly be undershooting them. That being said, they do have some abilities to help. Most importantly, the Incendiary Bomb, which their attacks will light up an area on fire and deal damage per second to anything that goes through it. But your allied units are vulnerable to this damage as well, obviously, as the upgrade says. In case I didn't say it, I don't remember if I did, but this price over here on the side is how much supplies it costs to upgrade your unit in the game. The upgrade for the units itself affects all of them, not just this particular squad of them. We got Phoenixes, which are pretty much just air marksmen. Their health is okay, they are pretty quick, and they deal a shit ton of damage. No splash, and they attack real slow. They can hit air and ground, they spawn in the group of 2, and they also have a crazy amount of abilities as well. Most importantly, we have Quantum Assembly, so whenever a Phoenix gets destroyed, it'll flop, the cockpit anyway, will fly on over to an undestroyed Phoenix and then try to assemble itself. Of course, this can only happen a few times in battle, so, you know, like a Phoenix rises from the ashes, this one will too. Very good units. I prefer Marksmen to them as well, but, you know, oftentimes you'll see people either going Phoenixes or Marksmen, and so they'll have a little bit of duel to see who's the better, higher ground one. The Marksmen have a much further range than the Phoenix, though, even with the upgrade, so that's something to take in consideration. But yeah, Phoenixes are pretty neat. Rhino. Rhino is great. A single unit mech that is a giant, or a sub-giant anyway, as you can see with these people here, with giant chainsaw hands. They can obviously only attack ground. They move quick as shit. They are very, very tanky. They do a splash damage in an area, but they are melee ranged, even though they attack quickly. Final Blitz is what was being used against me in the last video, so whenever the Rhino goes down to 0 health, it explodes, dealing his total max HP, which is a lot of damage to everyone around him. Very, very fun units. Not only this, but they have Whirlwind, which kind of attacks in a full circle around them. These are very, very, very good at taking out a very pack of units, so like Crawlers or Fangs, as well as one-on-one fights with other large units. Such as like tanks, or marksmen, or others, because of how quick they are. But of course, they can attack air, and they can easily be overwhelmed if you don't use enough of them. Great in a group, not so great with 1 or 2 of. The most unique unit in the game is the Hacker. Small set of abilities, not very tanky, not very fast. His attack is kind of different. He can only attack ground units. His range is okay. And he has 0 splash. So what does the Hacker do? This is a sub-giant unit, kind of like the Rhino. Comes in just a single unit. But what he does is convert enemy robots to your robots, which can be done very, very well. All of his abilities, almost all of them, are very, very unique. Enhanced control, so whenever you hack an enemy unit, they recover their maximum HP. What the Hacker does is, instead of dealing damage, it charges up a blue bar under their health bar until they reach their current health. And this is the attack it deals to show how much of that health bar he gets when converting. Whenever they hit their the enemy bot's current health, the hacker takes control of them. So what Enhanced Control does is fully heal them once he takes control. So if you have an enemy unit that your units are firing at, and they're only at 20% life, the hacker will take them at 20%, or restore them to full. They have their own personal energy shield that bubbles around them and protects units close to the hacker as well. And then multiple, so he can target up to 5 additional beams, but those additional beams are only 17% as powerful as the original one. Hackers are very unique and can be incredibly frustrating whenever facing against them. They have to be used very, very cautiously because they are expensive to get. And, obviously they can be quickly shut down if you're not careful. But once you have a decent army built up, if you see like rhinos or balls or other kinds of units that are getting right up into your face, hackers are a great way, so long as you have a good front line for them and they're not being picked off by any kind of sniper fire from a marksman or a phoenix. Next up, we have the next 5 are giants. We have the Vulcan. Insanely huge bot with giant flamethrowers on his arms. Insane amount of health, not very fast. Attack is meh, but the attack interval is incredibly quick. Deals a ton of splash in the shape of a cone, and its range is okay. Ground unit only, he has quite a few abilities. Excuse me. He is generally and entirely the anti-swarm unit. He does not deal crazy enough damage to anything with a lot of health to actually make it worthwhile, but if your opponent has anything on the ground that swarms, fangs, mustangs, crawlers, honestly even tanks, the Vulcan is able to deal with it. He has increased range, scorching flames just increase general damage. He can shoot incendiary bombs out, so he launches his own missiles at the enemies that explode into like little fire circles for AoE. And then he can even summon a marksman at the beginning of combat at the same level as the Vulcan to join at his side to fight. Vulcans will absolutely shred an enemy's swarm lines, and it can turn the tide pretty quickly, but he is very expensive. The Fortress. The OG look to any kind of bot with an insane amount of abilities. He is a ground-only bot that is the tankiest unit in the game, except for one, the new one. Slow, incredibly high attack, deals a good bit of splash, attack slow, decent range, and of course only ground. This guy is incredibly modular for whatever you need to do. He has a giant energy shield if you want it. He can attack air if you want it. He summons 12 fangs every 28 seconds if you want it. You can overload his type of attack interval. You can increase his range. You can have him shoot twice, give him more armor to be more tanky. You name it. The most unique ability he has, though, is Rocket Punch. So whenever his health hits at 85%, at 55%, he shoots one of his arms off pretty much, which he doesn't use to attack, but then it explodes in an area 25 meters around the target to annihilate stuff. He's very good at one-on-ones against any kind of bigger bots. He's really, really good as a general tank with that shield especially to hide your back lines, and he can absolutely wreck up some air with his air barrage, as it is an incredibly far range for his ability as well. His only big issue is dealing with smaller swarmy units, but his Rocket Punch ability kind of makes up for that. Next up, we got the Melting Point, which is honestly just one big ball. Melting Point is a very, very, very fun unit. He is good against anything large and only anything that is large. So giant ships, giant mechs, you name it, your Melting Point will take care of it. Very, very tanky as well. Same thing as the ball, though. Charges up at 1 damage, but can deal over 6,000 damage per tick. Very good range, and he can hit air and ground. A decent little bit of abilities. This guy can make crawlers if you so choose him to. But his abilities are relatively unique. So he can launch a bunch of missiles at the start of the round, which deal an EMP blast and slowing everything down, just like losing one of your towers. And of course, he heals from the damage he deals as well. Very, very unique unit, very fun to use, but again, they have a massive issue with swarms. If you can deal with swarm stuff, Melting Points can carry you, especially if they're dealing enough damage to heal off of it with their insane health bar. They can really, really, really stay on the field for a long time. We have the Overlord, which is your giant airship. That's what it is. It's not very tanky, but it moves pretty decent, has a good amount of attacks, and a good amount of range, as well as shooting air and ground targets. Lots of abilities on this bad boy as well. I personally use field maintenance, which increases his health and then, regenerates health. Increases range, armor, and makes wasps every 28 seconds, kind of like a mothership. But he can do a bunch of different things too, like Overlord Artillery, which installs ground turrets on the side of him to deal with ground more easily. You can jump drive him to constantly move where he is in the battlefield between rounds. Photon emission, so he can't be affected by any kind of status effects, like slowing down or frozen or taken over. Really, really good stuff. Increases splash with high explosive. These are a great unit to flank against your opponents later on, especially if they don't have very good anti-air. You can really mess somebody up and really throw off their game with these. But granted, they are not as tanky as you would like them to be, so use them wisely. And last but not least, the War Factory. The biggest mech in the game. It is huge, as you can see by its space. It is a 7x7 square. It costs 800, which is the most in the game, and it has an upkeep cost. Unlike the other ones, he has a few abilities, which I'm not even done unlocking them all, as well as instead of being able to take 4, he takes 7 different abilities. This is just basically, as it says, a giant mobile war factory. It has an insane amount of health, but it is very slow. Its big main gun up here deals a crazy amount of damage with a bit of splash, relatively slow but from far away, and he cannot deal with air. But what makes him unique is that he can actually spawn units to join in the game every X amount of seconds, which, every 4, 5, and 10 seconds may not seem like a lot, but it actually is. Whenever a War Factory 2 makes a unit, so say you have sledgehammers and you upgraded them, they get different abilities throughout the game. Whenever he summons a sledgehammer, those sledgehammers get those abilities too. Same for any other units that your bigger boys may be summoning. They are very, very, very cool. They do have this one right here, which decreases the upkeep cost by 100, so it's only going to cost you 50 units around, which is a very cheap upgrade to get. You can get instantly. I have been absolutely dumpstered by some War Factories so far. People that rush into them, though, don't do so well, mostly because a War Factory it has one gun and one target every couple seconds, even though it deals a lot of damage, and sometimes the units that it spawns just can't keep up against an entire army. But getting a few War Factories in, the only way you can honestly deal with War Factories is if you have enough Overlords or Phoenixes or melting points. Otherwise, it's going to take it. It's going to take it, because it can summon tanks, which can help with small amounts of swarm as well as good frontliners. Balls, which help against really, really big units and people with chunkier health bars to take down. And Phoenixes to help with air and to really just pluck things off from the back as your War Factory keeps on trudging forward. So these are the units of Mechabellum. Thank you guys for watching. I hope I got you a little bit interested in the game. Absolutely fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough, sincerely. It's not very expensive either. So get your ass over to Steam right now. I am no longer asking. Get Mechabellum. I want to play against you. Please do. Yeah, shoot me an invite. I'm not sure if anything here is enough for you to find me. Maybe not, but go ahead and try regardless. I'd love to play against you guys. I'd like to hear your thoughts about the game. Maybe start just building a small community. Have certain days where we all do some mech fights here. Maybe even giving out a little rewards too. Eventually. Channel's still small, but regardless. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.